Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's event. My name is Shirine Khoury-Haq, and I'm one of the events team, and I've got the great pleasure of putting together the Bristol Distinguished Address Series this year. We've been delighted this term to proudly showcase many of our alumni who are making waves in Bristol, nationally and internationally on the stage, from Bristol creatives such as Dr. Edson Burton, Lady Nade and Dr. Sean Rogers, to internationally acclaimed land artist and sculptor Sir Richard Long earlier this week. Tonight is no exception as we end on a great high for this autumn, welcoming another very special UWE Bristol alum, Shirine Khoury-Haq, CEO of the Co-op Group. Before I go on, there are no planned fire drills today, so if you do hear a fire alarm go off, please calmly head towards the exit where the watershed staff will guide you outside the building. The conversation part of our evening, which we're so looking forward to, will extend into the evening with our drinks reception, where you'll have the opportunity to mingle and meet other members of the audience. But now I'm delighted to welcome our very international live stream audience tonight, which includes viewers in France, Germany, Hungary, Tenerife, and then all the way across to Sri Lanka, India, Vietnam, Malaysia, and sunny Australia. So you've certainly drawn in an international crowd, Shirine. In the host chair tonight is Rachel Evans, Head of Alumni Engagement for UWE Bristol. Rachel's role is focused on building affinity and pride in UWE amongst the alumni community, alongside creating opportunities for our alumni network to support current students. Rachel studied law at UWE and is also a member of the alumni community herself. And she's delighted to be hosting this BDAS event and to be in conversation with such an inspiring fellow alum. I now introduce Professor Elena Marco, Pro-Vice-Chancellor and Head of the College of Arts, Technology and Environment at UWE, to welcome Shirine.
Wow. What an evening for all of us. It is an absolute honor to welcome Shirine Khoury-Haq. My Spanish pronunciation lets me down.
Better than most.
The first female CEO for the Co-op since its foundation, 180 years, I believe. Before being the CEO, she was the CFO, which in itself is quite an achievement. But I believe not only you are the CEO, you also took care of your twin daughters that they were 3 years old. Wow. She is still very much one of the few women leading an FTSE 100 company in the UK, and I would argue one of the very, very few that comes from a global majority. She is indeed very proud of her Turkish and Palestine heritage. It is part of who you are. Before this post, you have worked as a CEO of the Lloyd London, where you implemented a program of modernisation in the operating model, not an easy achievement. You have worked globally in companies such as McDonald's, IBM, or Catering Group. And you, I believe, have contributed incredibly in the regulator sector, and you have changed industry. And of course, as Julia has already mentioned, you are a UWE alumni, and that makes us very proud to see someone like yourself being with us today. So for me, it makes it extra special. I believe you grew up in a global context, as your father worked in many countries. I have been told that the only continent that you have not lived is Antarctica. You speak 5 languages, including Español. Un poquito. You indeed grew up with diversity and values diversity. Preparing for this moment, I read some of the articles about yourself. And one of them kind of explained, in 2017, you did an interview for the Evening Standard, where you told the grueling days that you have. Apparently, you start around 6 a.m. in the morning. You are at work in the office by 9 a.m. I've heard that can be a bit shaky at times.
Yeah, that was when anyway, yes. Let's yeah.
You do a full day work and then you go back to take care of your children and continue working until midnight.
That bit's true.
Even though I believe you have an indulgence. Walking your fabulous dog, Teddy. Of course, in between business calls. But I believe that helps you relax.
Yes.
You work hard, you do your best, and you are indeed very kind. And you have got very strong work ethics. You have also had setbacks that have made you learn. You have not got here with some of them. And not everything has been easy. I believe you have learned from those experiences and you've learned to prioritize and a sense of self-worth. Authenticity and credibility are the key to be an effective CEO, and that's what you live. Building resilient individuals for the future is what you do. And you have already built an incredible legacy for the future. You are doing what you can to create positive impact. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome tonight Shirine Khoury-Haq to give us the Bristol Distinguished Address. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we'll move into our conversation. Shirine, I'm so delighted to be here to talk to you this evening. I'd really love to talk a little bit about your background, then your professional and your leadership style, and then a little bit about the co-op. We've had some questions submitted from the audience online and also the audience in the room, which I've sort of woven into our conversation seamlessly, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yes. So I'd love to start by talking a little bit about your international background. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us globally where you've lived, the story of your education and maybe your childhood?
Yes. So my father is he passed away, but he was Palestinian. My mother Turkish. I was born in Beirut in Lebanon, where my grandparents were living at the time, and where my father was working. My father was a geophysicist, so wherever the oil and gas was, that's where we found ourselves. And yes, it's true, we ended up, by the time I was 12, living on every continent except for Antarctica. So that's kind of how I grew up. I ended up living in Australia when I finished high school, graduated from high school there, went on to the Australian National University, then moved to the United States. I started off working in finance because my degree was in accounting and economics. I did my MBA at the Ohio State University. I also qualified as an accountant when I was in the US. By then I was working, had worked for McDonald's, where I ran stores. I ran 4 regions from a finance and operations perspective, and then moved to IBM. And then ended up 3 years with IBM in the United States, and then moved to the UK. And then it was IBM that brought me to UE as well. So I did a postgraduate diploma in management and leadership here through an IBM program.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I ended up in this country.
That's amazing. You gave an interview on Desert Island Discs, and you said, if everything around you is moving and changing, one has to be centred in oneself, which is why I chose from an early age to invest in myself, save my money and set my goals. I decided I would be my own anchor. So what did that look like for you in terms of coping with all the moving around and all the changes of location and culture?
Well, it wasn't just moving around. A number of times my father lost his job, and so there was the, oh my God, where do you go next? And it was changing schools, so out of one school system into another. So I've been in the British school system, in the American school system, in the Australian school system, and then when we moved, it would often be in the middle of a school year. So my mother wasn't going to put up with her daughter repeating anything. So she'd go into the principal's office and say, she's done half of this, let's just push her to the next level, which meant that when we lived in Houston, I was 14 years old in grade 10 with 16-year-old girls who were wearing makeup, high heels. I'd just emerged from the Amazon jungle. I was 2 years younger. They were driving. I was still trying to figure out makeup and high heels, couldn't even keep up with the driving. So there was a lot of moving around, and my parents didn't always get along very well. So I thought, look, this whole thing's a shit show, and I can't count on anybody here. So I need to get a degree. I need to get my education. I started working when I was 14, putting money away because I didn't know if anyone would be able to afford to send me to university or pay for anything. So that's basically it. It was about making sure I got the education, I got myself on my own 2 feet, I was able to take care of myself. But also when you move from culture to culture and from different languages and you're always the outsider, you can get quite buffeted around. You can be told what to think. You can be told how to behave, and that can mean a lot of upheaval, or a lot of lack of self-identity. And that sounds a little pompous, what you read out, but effectively it was saying very early on, you've got to know who you are and what you stand for and what your boundaries are. Because if you don't know that, when you end up moving in that way and when everything else is moving under you, it's very hard to kind of ground yourself and to move forward.
And is that what you would say then is one of the biggest challenges of being a global citizen for you, that you experienced?
Being a global citizen as an adult is very different from being a global citizen as a child. So while the adults in your life might be putting a roof over your head and food on the table, as an adult, you have more control. You make the decision to go to that place. Whereas as a child, you just end up there. And then you don't have any friends, and there are all the cliques. And, when you're in an international school, everybody's a bit that way. When you find yourself in a small town in Australia where everyone's known each other since they were very, very young, and then you've suddenly got to fit in, and you're of a different race that perhaps people have a degree of racism towards, and you speak with a different accent, you've got to adapt very quickly. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's more difficult, at least it was for me, to be that global citizen as a child. Mm. I've moved around, I've worked globally. This is my only UK job that I've ever had, one country job. Every other job has been global. Mm-hmm. But I find it easier to do this as an adult.
That's really interesting. Thinking about your studies, potentially particularly at UE then, so we're a very global, very international community. What did you take away from your time at UE? What do you remember about your studies there in the city and those sorts of things?
The wonderful thing about the program that I did here was that it was part of work. And I did my MBA in a similar way as well. So I studied at night, and then I was able to go into work the next day. This was when I was at McDonald's, and practice what I learned. So at McDonald's, for example, my module in my MBA on international business, I then went into work, and I did. Are there any Pakistani people in the audience at all? Anyone? Zahor, I know you're. So I built the launch plan of McDonald's into Pakistan, so I can take credit for that. But it was great to be able to study and apply it to work, and it was the same thing at UE. We learned about business and leadership. I got selected because IBM had picked their top 20 leaders in the UK and put them on this program. So you were able to practice that back at work, which is, for me, a great way to learn. It takes the theory, you can practice it, you can try to break it and play with it, and then really learn from it.
I mean, yeah, we're still polytechnic background, so we're still a very vocational, practice-led institution. We have actually had a couple of questions that relate more to our student community. So someone was asking, how can an apprentice or graduate begin to lead and show leadership qualities despite being at the bottom of the corporate ladder and having little influence within their team?
I think you can pick a thing to lead. You can as part of your day job. If you are kind of within a very large organization, it's very hard to go in and kind of manage the department, right? But what you can do is you can pick something that's important and offer to lead that, whether it's in your own area or across the wider organization. I can give you lots of examples of that. For me, early on, I decided to lead our gender diversity work within IBM. That was very important. It wasn't developed enough, and in consulting, where you have to travel so much, you didn't see very many women progressing. So for me, that was a really important thing to grab and to try to lead, and I've done that along the way. The thing is, if you can show that kind of leadership by doing something like that, it crosses across multiple functions. You do get to meet a broader network, and it does help you to progress.
As we've sort of ventured into the leadership sphere, I think we'll sort of carry on now thinking about you as a leader with a human approach. So looking back, you gave an interview to The Guardian in February this year, and you talked about Co-op being a disruptive organisation that broke the status quo, and that the founding principles were actually quite forward-thinking for their time. So how do you embrace that disruptiveness as a leader, but in a human and positive way?
So just a little bit of background on the Co-op. It was founded 180 years ago. Our birthday's on the 21st of December, so we're not quite 180, but almost. It was founded at a time where there was huge socioeconomic disparity. Lots of people had moved from rural areas to urban areas, and they were being exploited. So, for example, working class people were often paid in vouchers, and those vouchers could only be spent at the company store. If you bought food at the company store, it was often adulterated. So there was chalk that would be replacing flour. There were products that were used to whiten, flour and other things that could kill you, and they did. So there was actually a study that was done at the time that said, as part of the Industrial Revolution, the poor will get poorer, and it was decided that actually no one had time to deal with that. They were going to focus on the growth instead. The founders of the Co-op said, actually, that's not good enough. And they founded this organization where they said, for the price of £1, which was a lot of money at the time, you can be a member of the Co-op, you can shop in a Co-op store, and you can be assured of good quality food at fair prices. And they only started off with 5 products to begin with. But that enabled people to be able to have that dignity. It was anyone could be a member. It was well before women could vote. It was where, ethnic minorities really didn't have much of a place in society, but anyone could become a member. And then it was one member, one vote. And the principles were around democracy, they were around education, they were around self-help. So if you go to Rochdale in Manchester, on the top floor, there was a reading room. They started to teach people and children how to read and write, to bring up people who are of the lowest socioeconomic levels up to to help them progress their lives and progress their opportunities. That was utterly disruptive at the time because of the class structure in this country, people were expected to stay where they were. The wonderful thing about it was that it grew from there. And where the working class didn't even have a vote, this organization grew and grew and grew and became one of the most successful organizations in the country. In World War II, the co-op was shipping in wheat for this country because it was only the co-op that had the trading relationships and the shipping lines to be able to do that. And it was run by working class people. Okay, so the question then became, if the working class can run this hugely successful organization, why can't they vote? And then they created the Co-op Party. So immense disruption, and eventually they were a part of being able to move society in the right direction. And the co-op has the ability to continue to do that. And I think it's important that, you know, as leaders, we shouldn't be afraid of disrupting. We should look for what our organizations can do and what we within our organizations can do to disrupt the status quo. And to be able to use all of our skills and our resources to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that insight in the background as well to the I think one of the first stores as well to do self-service.
It was the first to do self-service.
Yeah. I wanted to bring in an audience question at this point. So someone has asked, should a leader be seen as kind, or does this indicate that they are soft? And how relevant is kindness to achieving trust?
Well, I've got members of my team here, and they can tell you if I'm kind or soft. I think you can be both. I think you have to be tough from a business perspective, from a commercial perspective. I mean, it is so hard to run a business right now. And the economic circumstances and the economic environment that we're in and some of the political changes that are it makes business harder and harder and harder. That doesn't mean that you have to be mean, right? You can be quite tough in making business decisions, but you can treat people kindly and with dignity and with respect at all times. And what I've found is that that's reciprocated. If you're kind to people, they're kind back. If they feel valued, they feel accountable. You get so much more out of people when they want to do what they're doing and when they respect the people that they work for. And then that goes further as well, right? So I want to be kind to people, but then I want them to be kind to others in order to get to where we need to go. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's something you talked about in your Desert Island discs. Again, you sort of mentioned people not standing behind a vision if they don't feel like they've had a chance to create it, to help create it, that you're a builder and a grower. And you think about how other people would like to be treated in the same situation. Thinking back then, reflecting, what are you most proud of that you've instigated as a leader, of the changes that you've brought about in any business?
So again, you can split that between commercial and other. Mm-hmm. So when I took on the role as CEO, the co-op wasn't in a great place. Mm-hmm. We had almost £1 billion of debt. We had a business that wasn't performing in the way that it did. We've turned that around very significantly. Our debt is down by 95%. Our performance is exceeding the market in many of our businesses. So I'm very proud to have done that. And that is my background in other businesses as well. From a people perspective, in order to get to those results, we've had to make some hard choices, right? So we had redundancies in our head office. We had people who left the organization. We tried to treat everybody with the utmost respect and dignity. But those are things that every business leader has to decide. Things that I'm really proud of are around what we've done in terms of social mobility, in terms of inclusion. We introduced a fertility policy where anyone who's undergoing fertility treatment or has a spouse that's, so if their spouse doesn't work for the co-op, but they do, they get unlimited time off. We've extended our maternity policies, our parental leave. We have a menopause policy. We have a bereavement policy. It even extends to pets, actually. So if anyone's lost a pet, you know it's like losing a child, and you can't just show up at work and do a great job, you do need some time off. So, we've tried to put that sort of humanity into the business. I'm very proud of that. I don't want to close off this question, though, without talking about some of the things that we've done for our communities and for wider society as well. So we have an academy trust that runs 38 schools. We serve 20,000 students. And those are schools that we have specifically selected in some of the most socioeconomically challenged parts of this country. And we've built, best in class, beautiful schools. Almost all of them are at least good rated now. Some of them are now reaching outstanding. To be able to give those kids the best possible education. Every child who comes to our school gets breakfast. Every child gets lunch, and many of you will know the school lunch criteria is quite strict. If you don't quite meet it, you may not get a school lunch. If you go to one of our academies, you will get a school lunch. We also do other things like we have family time. Many of our students don't have steady family backgrounds. Many are in care. So some of our schools do, a meal together where you serve your other classmates, you clean up the table. They have a get-together time as they're approaching going home, so that at least they go home with a full stomach. We have community fridges in our schools as well, where we have food. The parents can come in and get food for their families. So, there are so many things that we do in the co-op in terms of serving our communities, in terms of these schools, internationally as well. 3p of every liter of water that we sell goes towards providing water and sanitation for communities in our suppliers. So in Africa, for example, we have a lot of micro suppliers that provide us with cocoa and coffee. But women often can't work because they have to spend 8 hours a day going to the well to get water and bring it back for their families. And for those communities, for 3 million people in Africa, we've provided water and sanitation, which helps those communities to thrive, but very importantly, helps women to be able to work and earn their own money and take care of their families instead of having to provide at the most basic level.
Mm-hmm. That you start to see the difference in the business model and the way that the co-op works, and I will touch a little bit on fair trade a little bit further down the questions, but someone submitted a question, Tony Stubbs, CEO of Transpire Global. What are the hard business benefits of taking that human approach to leadership? Yeah, for you.
I have to knock on wood when I say this. I've never had a direct report resign in my entire career. We've had people move on because that's been the changes in the business. I've had people who've said, I'm looking for something different, and I've helped them find another job, but I haven't had a direct report resign. And I'm very, very proud of that. I think that permeates. If you can get people to really believe in what you're doing, to give their all to it, to feel like they really have a voice and they can speak up, then your business starts to get better as well. My leadership team, and through the work that Zahor's doing actually throughout the business, we're increasing the level of diversity that we have significantly, and that's across all forms of diversity. And what I find at my leadership team level is that means that you can have conversations in our business that you really can't have in other places. We were setting up a Friday morning meeting, and we have on Tuesdays our leadership team meeting. That's our hard executive meeting. On Friday we have a catch up, and we were trying to decide the time to have the catch up. And there was a lot of talk about, I don't want it too early. That's the one day that I've told my children I can drop them off at school. And so I was on a phone call listening to this argument, And I didn't say anything, but what I loved was that every one of those arguments was brought up by a man. Not one woman had to talk about her kids and how she had to make sacrifices. So it's okay to talk about these things. We've had a lot of letters from our members about the situation in Gaza. And what the co-op is planning to do about that. Again, we have very open conversations at our leadership team, at our board. We have, you asked me what a person that's more junior in the organization can do. 54,000 of our 55,000 employees are members. And 3 of them got together and said, we're really, really worried about people in Gaza, and we want to do something about it. And they have now created a group of 400 people who are raising money for Palestinian people. They're, stocking products from Palestinian fair trade. We have Jewish and Israeli members of that 400-person group who are working on peace initiatives along with Palestinian colleagues. So that sort of activism, that sort of being able to talk directly about issues brings people together in a way that I hear from other members of my peers, other people that I talk to. Those conversations can't necessarily be held elsewhere. So there is something about kindness, there's something about respect, but there is something huge about diversity, not just in how people look and how they're constituted, but enabling the thought and the ability to bring forward that thought that really brings business benefit, in my view.
I've got a question perhaps a little bit later about diversity specific in the stats, some of the stats for the co-op, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of the bits you talked about there. You talked about the Friday meeting. So I just someone asked a question, what's your advice for aspiring talented managers who are overworked and questioning their work-life balance?
I don't know. I feel like I'm a bit overworked sometimes as well, and we do engagement surveys, and my own team's results. 100% understand the vision, 100% believe they can do their jobs, but almost 100% overworked. So what can I say? I always say to people, put your family first. If there are issues with trying to manage the work and the life, speak up about it, and then we can try to do something about it. I run a team. My leadership team is broad, and I have a lot of people reporting to me. And it was part of our turnaround, and I got challenged on that quite a bit. The great thing about it, though, is we talk about everything in front of everybody. So if someone does have to go and do something to balance out their personal life, there's always someone who can step in and fill in for it, always, because everyone understands the broader picture, and we try to cascade that down through the organization. But it can be tough, and you have to speak up. You have to put your family first, because at the end of the day, your family are the ones that are going to be with you if you manage to hang on to them. And work is work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said it did mean you have PDR season is a bit of a nightmare with all your direct reports. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Another question.
Because
again.
I don't write just the 3 sentences, well done. I write quite a lot because I think, if people are going to put in a year of work, they deserve some proper feedback. And I don't surprise people, so you should never get a surprise. But we do talk about it through the year, but it's good to have it on record. So it is a bit of a nightmare.
You also talked about how the whole of the company is brought into the same vision and the same direction. But there was a question that came in around how do you encourage all of the leaders in your organisation to take a humanistic approach, and how do you handle those who don't? Maybe there aren't any.
Oh, no, there are. There are people. You have to lead by example. You have to empower people to speak up if they are not experiencing that from their managers. and people do speak up. I get messages, and Georgie, my chief of staff here, she knows I get messages all the time from people who say, this is wrong, or I didn't like this happening, and then ensuring you intervene if people aren't treated in the right way.
Thank you. I'm just aware of time, so I want to just... there was a question. It's actually my question. So
I hope it's good.
Well, so do I now, because I told everybody it was mine. I shouldn't have said that, should I? It was actually related to your Desert Island Discs interview again, so I keep going back to that. But you talked about moments where you can just give up, or you can pick yourself up and keep going. And I wondered if you framed that differently for yourself, depending on whether it's a personal or a professional moment. And in the context of professional difficulties, have you responded differently as you've progressed in your career?
How do you answer this one? I think professionally, especially as you progress through your career, you become better able to determine the battles to fight. My view has been, if a battle's worth fighting, I go in and fight. There was a time a couple of years ago where I was advised by everybody, it's just too big. You cannot win this one. You really should just not do it. And I had a coach at the time, and he said, this is too big. Just don't do it. And I did it anyway. And I'm glad I did, because and my ethos has always been, if it was about myself, if it's about something that I'm going to get out of it personally, I won't fight for it, because that's a selfish reason. If you're fighting for something that has to do with the people that you're responsible for your customers, for the organization and what it can do to benefit society, then it's worth fighting for. And so I've always done that. I've always fought for the things that matter, but I've differentiated it. I've had big conversations with myself. Are you doing it for you, or are you doing it for the good of others? Mm-hmm. If I'm doing it for the good of others, then I'll fight it.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Thank you so much for answering that. I wanted to move on to maybe asking some more questions or talking a bit more about Co-op specifically, but we were just going to show a video first from your latest marketing campaign.
If you were inventing a business today, you'd do right by people. All people. Those who use it would own it. They'd control it. Pick its leaders. You'd lower the price on your most bought items. Insist if your meat can be British, it will be. And do everything you can to stop the abuse of shop workers. You'd make your carrier bags compostable and spend a chunk of your profits in your communities. If you were inventing a business today, you'd invent Co-op. Owned by you, right by you.
Okay, thank you.
So can I just say,
please,
we talked about the dog. When that ad first came out, my family and I, and Teddy the dog, sat on the couch. And the man that leans over and does this, Teddy started barking at the man. He did not like him. And then when he froze, he just stopped mid-bark. So that's my favorite part there.
Oh, that'll be all of our favourite parts from now on. So the Co-op Group has an incredibly diverse portfolio of businesses. You've got the food services, the funeral services, insurance, legal, who are based in Bristol. And I read in a speech you gave to the marketing group of Great Britain, you talked about your operating board and then having great personal relationships, which means that cross-functional decision-making works really effectively. But we had audience question in around, in an increasing world of polarised views, how difficult is it to lead a business of such scale?
Well, it's difficult. It's hard work. Even if you took any one of our businesses, it's hard work. I mean, the competition is incredibly tough at the moment. Cost of living has been difficult for everybody. COVID, I mean, imagine running grocery and funerals during COVID. You know, these are tough businesses to run, which is why for me it has been so important to ensure that every single one of our colleagues is engaged in the vision. So that vision that we created, the owned by you, right by you, and the vision underneath it, all of our colleagues were consulted on that, and we made sure we asked everyone what their views were. And then when it was launched, they heard their own views reflected in it. But you know, we do live in a polarized world. But when you have teams that are respectful, when everyone can have a voice, when you can have the argument in the room, but then go out having agreed the decision and then implement it and bring your people with you, it makes it a lot easier.
Brilliant, thank you. The marketing, actually, I wanted to touch on that. It seems that the shift has been to a very personal marketing approach, and you've also done social media posts where you've talked about kind of the Co-op's business results, your 2024 interim results. So what has led to the shift in the way that you're marketing yourselves as a business?
It was part of working on the strategy. So, you know, any CEO that takes over an organization looks at the organization and thinks, you know, what do we stand for? Is our strategy right? I didn't really have that luxury when I first started, to be honest, because the business was really struggling. So what I would have liked is to start at the group level and, you know, look at my strategy and ponder a bit. We had to go right into food, and we had to fix the food business, which we did. When we came back out again, one of the best things I think I did was, I'm lucky that I work for an organization that has such a long and interesting history. So many books have been written about the Co-op. So I picked up a history book on the Co-op and read about the times where it was the biggest retailer in this country, where it was, you know, it had shipping lines all over the world. It was a big global business. The Co-op even ran the New York Produce Exchange for a while. It was such was its size. And then I worked with my team to say, what is it about our business that's really special? First of all, we're a cooperative. And that means that we are owned by our members. You know, it's one member, one vote. I'm elected by our members. I do what our members say are important. But I think we'd lost that a little bit along the way. So the first thing we did was we put membership right at the heart of our strategy, and then built everything else around that. So our strategy includes things like, you know, scaling for growth, and it includes all of the sorts of building elements that you would expect, but membership is right at the middle of it. And the great thing about that is we are able to go out and consult with our members as we're launching new products, as we're building out new ideas. Our members are there, and the last time we had a consultation, 10,000 of them showed up to talk about a topic. You know, so we have tens of thousands of them who care enough because they own the business, they have a vote in the business to be able to engage. So that's what we are. Then we went out and we asked people, the general public, do you know what a cooperative is? And the answer was generally not really. So we thought, well, we should actually tell people because it's something special. And in this polarized world that you mentioned, where people don't always feel, especially young people, don't feel like they're able to really control the things that are important to them, the one thing they can do is they can control an organization like the Co-op, and they can direct what we do commercially, but they can also direct what we do societally as well. And what we found since launching this campaign is a huge increase in membership. When I took on my role, we had 4.2 million members that traded with us over a 12-month period. We've got about 12 million, but we only really count the ones that have traded with us in the last 12 months. We've now just hit over 6 million, and we've seen an almost 80% growth in Gen Z. Whereas previously our membership was more on the kind of over 52. I don't want to call them older. I'm 53, and they call older members over 50. Won't do that. But the over 50s was more where we were. But Gen Z has really picked up, and we are hearing from them that it's because they believe in our values. They believe in the impact that they and we can have together, and so that's why we did this.
And actually that leads really nicely on to the next. So thinking about the values piece more, UE is a fair trade university. We've been one since 2006, and we use this very much as a catalyst to kind of talk about societal issues, economic justice, environmental resilience and climate change. Why is fair trade important to the co-op, and does it reflect your own values?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And, we've been with Fair Trade since its inception. We're the second largest fair trade grocer in the world. With our wines, we're number one globally. We're number one globally for roses as well. So for us, it's incredibly important for all the reasons that you say, but also in terms of being able to give societies and producers real self-determination, which is why we then back it up with things like the water programs and other things that we do. We'll also, we have fair trade tea, fair trade coffee, fair trade chocolate. If there is anything with a co-op logo on it that has chocolate in it, it's fair trade. So it's even in our ingredients. And we do the same thing, it's not fair trade, but British meat. Some of our competitors say they have British meat, but it's not in the ready meals. It's in every one of our products. If we say British meat, if we say fair trade, it's there throughout the entire supply chain. So it is very important. It's important in terms of the resilience of the supply chain as well. There are a lot of products like coffee and chocolate, etc., or cocoa. They're produced by smallholders in parts of the world that are most susceptible to climate change. And that have real issues around resilience. So for us, fair trade is a mechanism for being able to invest in those communities as well and help them to thrive and work, but then also secure our supply chain.
So very much about empowerment and enabling, I wanted to touch briefly on the diversity point that you've brought up already. And again, just referring back to that speech to the marketing group of Great Britain that you gave. You talked about having a very diverse team, 43% female representation, 19% from an ethnic minority background, 10% identifying as being from the LGBTQ plus community, and 10% with a disability. So one question came in from the audience. Is the co-op board and staff group as diverse as you would like? And how would you suggest reaching diversity aspirations?
So Horace here, we talk about this all the time. He's our head of social mobility, inclusion, and belonging. My leadership team is diverse. Those are our stats. Our board is also diverse. As you get through the organization, the diversity starts to decrease. The next level of management doesn't have enough women on it. It doesn't have enough ethnic minorities on it. We also see some elements of bias. So where we see ethnic minorities, for example, applying for jobs, we see that they get through the process, but at the first face-to-face interview, they drop off, which is not what I want to see in the organization that I lead. But what we do is we measure all of that. It's entirely visible, and we make it visible to the management team, and we make it visible through the organization. And I will personally say it's not good enough. And for my management team, it's unacceptable to not be promoting as with diversity to reflect the society and the customers and members that we serve. So there are various things that we're working on. I think that, Zahora, I try to make your life easier by providing the right sponsorship, saying the right things, but it is a large organization. And, we're also prone, like every other organization, to issues that society has around diversity. So we continue to communicate about it, we build on it. It's not good enough, but at least we recognize it and we're working on it.
And just following on from that, diversity in terms of age, and you've already mentioned Gen Z is a sort of a new stakeholder group that you're finding are more interested in shopping with the Co-op. But we had a question from a student. What role will young people play in the development of Co-op policy?
So we have our Co-op young members who work with me, who meet with me, our executive team, our board. They give us their views on things that are important to them. We listen to them. We also have a council, so our members elect a group of 100 people to represent them. There we have a lot of young people there as well, so they play a part in our overall governance. And we also work with our students in our academies as well. We involve them in things like product development. We work with young people not just within our organization, but out in society as well. So, for example, we have a group that we work with called the Peer Action Collective. These are young people from challenged communities. We work with them to help them to find their own solutions for the challenges in their communities. Often what you find is that politicians, senior people like to tell young people what to do and what their problems are. That's not very effective because, they don't want that. What they do want to do is be told, here's some empowerment, we can help you, we'll back you, but you figure out what the issues are. We have a charity called the Co-op Foundation, which is the Co-op's charity, and they give out £25,000 grants to young people to work on issues within their communities. The funny thing about that was there was some concern about whether young people could handle £25,000. And, of course, these are older people saying, oh, can the young people handle it? We found that they were actually more frugal with that money. They were much more choiceful about where they spent it, and it was actually in good hands. So we don't need to worry about whether they can handle £25,000 or not. But it is about empowering. But within our own organisation as well, we have input from young people.
I dread to think what my daughter would do with £25,000, but never mind. So I've sort of come to the end of the questions that we've had pre-submitted and the ones that we as a team wanted to ask you. So I want to open up the floor to questions. We've got a couple of colleagues who are going to be wandering around with roving mics. Just a quick point to say we want to give as many people as possible the chance to ask a question. So if you could be succinct with your question, we would be most grateful. Has anyone got a question to start us off? There we go. I was going to say I've got some more. But yes, please.
Hi, Shirine. Thank you for being here tonight and sharing all of your insights. I understand in your early career you started training to be an accountant and you went on to become a CFO and now CEO. I am a first-year apprentice at EY, who I believe actually audit Co-op.
Yeah, do you?
Oh,
I'm sorry. We're not an easy organisation to audit, are we?
That's fine. I'm working in the banking and capital markets team, so I'll never come across Co-op.
Okay.
But I'm training to be an accountant and I want to go on to be a CFO or a CEO. And I see that you've taken that journey. What one piece of advice would you be able to give me? What could I do to accelerate that or increase the likelihood of me being able to achieve that goal?
You missed a part out of my career, which was when I actually left finance. I went off and became a COO, and then I was brought back in to be a CFO. CFO was not the job that I really wanted, to be honest, but it was probably one of the best moves that I made. The best advice that I can give you as CEO is to really understand more than just a niche thing, right? Where you see some CEOs fall over, it's because they haven't had the breadth of experience. So my advice to you is you learn your craft in accounting, because that's, for me, again, that was an amazing degree. I did my degree in accounting and economics. To be able to read a P&L, to be able to look at an organization's financial health and to be able to ask the right questions is invaluable. but you also have to know how to implement things. You also have to know how to lead people. So I'm not sure that a niche path up to CFO and then to CEO is the right way. I would be looking at other opportunities, and in an organization like EY, you could go into consulting, you could go out into industry, broaden your experience, and also have some patience as well. Because if you've got that level of ambition, you want it to happen tomorrow. That doesn't mean you're ready tomorrow. And careers are long now, right? Personally, I'm not allowed to retire ever because my husband says that I'll need a project and he doesn't want to be it. So I have to work forever. But you've got until your 60s and your 70s, and you want to be a CEO when you're ready and you can be successful, rather than be a CEO that then crashes and burns. So my advice is get lots of experience, but the operations space is a great place. Learn how IT works, learn how businesses work, learn how processes work, so that you can get that broad view of a business.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we had one down here. I think you were next. Yeah, I think we've got a mic for you.
Hi. So I was just wondering how your leadership style may be different now you're at the top versus maybe 10 years ago, or how is your approach different?
I'm not sure. The being at the top is overrated. What I thought when I became CEO, I thought, wow, I'm in charge now. I can do things. No. What happened was people sat me down, especially our public affairs team, and they told me exactly how it was, right? You do this, you do that, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, be there. I mean, look, you're sitting next to the person who bosses me around the most, right? She's always telling me where to be and what to do and everything else. I don't know if my leadership style has changed. I don't think it has. I still work with a lot of people that I worked with 10 years ago. I'm still very good friends with them. I don't think I've changed very much. Maybe I've got a little bit more patient because I can't do everything myself. And I've learned that sometimes things take a bit longer. But if you bring people with you, then it's more successful in the long run.
Thank you. Would you like?
Yes.
Yes. Good. Thank you.
Hello. I'm interested in researching the tension between the human approach, which I'm formulating an idea about in the industry that I work in, which is further education, versus a very neoliberal perspective on approaching business and business development. And I was wondering if you would like to talk a little bit about that tension between how valuable this is compared to the neoliberal, which kind of dominates business and business approaches.
What do you mean by neoliberal?
So neoliberalism is the focus on performativity, and it's profit-driven, and it's less human. It's more about the sort of organisational development of businesses, and it's about, so for us, it's all about sort of meeting targets. It would be about statistics around outcomes and that kind of thing, where the human and everything that you spoke about is removed, and it's all about, are we reaching everything that we're
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Which organization would you rather devote your time and energy to?
Exactly.
That tells you everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When we came out of COVID and there was this big question of, is flexible working a thing? Should we bring people back into the office? Those organizations that forced their employees back into the office, it was great because they ended up with the dinosaurs that they deserved. The people who had, the people who had opinions, who had self-worth, who valued family, who were rounder individuals, chose to leave organizations like that and come to organizations like ours. And those two types of, they're not binary. You can work for a human organization where you're treated with dignity. And I'm not saying we're perfect. Look, I get reports on issues that happen every day within the co-op. But you can work for a human-led organization that has very hard targets and drives profit as well. And I hope that if you talk to any member of my team, you'd know that we love our people, we want everyone's opinion, we want to bring everyone with us, but we need to perform. And so you can do both of those things at the same time, and you perform a lot better if the people within your organization feel comfortable and able to speak up and to be able to actually determine the direction the organization goes, rather than have a diktat come from on high that they have to deliver and be treated badly in the process. People won't stay in organizations like that.
Thank you.
Question down there.
Shirine, you talked earlier about the structural changes that you had to go through in the co-op, and that led to an increased number of direct reports, which more of like a flat organization. I've seen that in a lot of multinationals, and it was not working, but you talked about more of a meeting type setup. So can you shed more light on how did you make it effective? Because again, I've seen it like 3 or 4 times, and it was merely done because of the cost cutting point of view, but I haven't seen it work in action. Thank you.
At that marketing thing that you talked about, the person who brought me in was one of our board directors, and she stood up afterwards and said that she will put her hand up and she will admit that she told me it wasn't going to work. And now she's putting her hand up and she'll admit defeat, and it does work. What did we do? We didn't do it for cost cutting. We did it because I needed everyone who had their hands on the business, who were spending money in the business and could save money and make the business work, in the same room. And I didn't run the team as a hub and spoke. I ran it as a collective. So when we were turning the business around, we had 4 objectives, 4 very clear objectives, and the entire business focused on those 4 objectives. And everyone in the room needed to focus on them, and we delivered on them together. At the way that we run it now, it's a lot less drastic because we're in a growth phase and we're in a completely different place. But having all those people in the room, all of those leaders, without having to cascade decision-making, without having egos, big egos in the room. I mean, the egos went, right? So when we put this structure in, the previous executive, I was the only person left. And then everybody else came up from under the executive. So we talk about all the issues. We have KPIs that everyone delivers on, but it's across the entire business. There are certain people, again, like Sahur, who technically, grade-wise, would not be reporting directly to me, but he is on my leadership team because I need the voice of inclusion in every single decision that we make and in every topic. And Zahur does a great job on that. We'll be talking about something completely, off the wall, and he'll say, but how do we make this inclusive? And here are some issues that you're going to face, around ranging, for example, around making sure that not only our colleagues are included, but our customer base as well. So, for us, it's absolutely working, but you need a leadership style that is in the way that we talked about, where you ask for everyone's opinion, you consolidate that opinion, but you come out with a decision and a set of actions that everyone can stand behind and deliver.
Just out of curiosity, what was the number before and after, just for me to know? The number of direct reports before and then the number after?
Well, there was no before, because the minute I became CEO kind of overnight. I was told on a Friday and I was CEO on the Monday. That was kind of how it worked. So before, we had an executive team of 5 people, and then the next day I had 17 direct reports.
Okay, thank you.
Take one there and then continue.
Shirine, thank you for coming and all your insights. I'm an insurance lawyer. Obviously, you spent time at XL Caitlin, I think, or Caitlin. What would your advice to me be in terms of transitioning from professional indemnity, marine cargo, etc., into underwriting?
Oh, gosh. What would my advice? I was also the COO of Lloyd's as well. Are you in one of these firms now?
Just waiting fourth set of protracting negotiations
Oh,
with the top
God.
15.
Okay.
One of their ethos is disrupt to innovate, which
Yeah.
I think links to what you were speaking about earlier.
Look, as a lawyer in that space, you clearly know the market and you know that business line. My suggestion would be to go and talk to whoever leads underwriting and express that interest. I can tell you, where I've made moves in my career, I found that asking people to give me a job didn't always work. What I did was I waited for an opportunity to do a job for free, did that job, and then asked for the job, if that makes sense. So for...
Suggested I do a week's placement on a pro bono basis to see, they said they see me fitting into the firm, but they don't quite know where yet.
Yeah, so, and have you told them outright you're interested in underwriting?
Sorry, this is coming back to an insurance law firm, so,
Okay.
One of my other options is whether I transition into underwriting. Obviously, I've got the sector knowledge and, things like combined ratios,
Yeah,
like
cool.
soft markets, but haven't got that direct underwriting experience.
Yeah, so look, my advice would be make sure everybody knows that that's what you're interested in and send it out to the universe. Because look, again, if I think about how I've made career moves, I've done two things. The first is, in one of my jobs, for example, I knew my next role was to be COO. That organization lost its COO for the UK business. I was already doing a different operations role. I offered to do that job for free in addition to my day job. Isn't it great? They were spending a lot of money on somebody. Now it was being done for free. Did it for a year, did it well, and then asked for that to be normalized, and then got the pay rise that I was due. But I wouldn't have gotten that job if without the right experience I'd said I want to apply with everybody else, and then it would have gone through a whole process. Giving it to me for free, hey, that's easy. Right? And the other thing that I did do was, again, when I wanted to move, when I moved to, across different industries and different roles, I would go to headhunters and I would ask for the job description or the job profile of the role that I wanted to go into. And I'd look at the requirements, and then I'd match that up against my CV and then volunteer to do things that ticked it off. So again, with COO, what I decided was I needed to run a global operations function. I wanted to manage 300 people, and I wanted to manage a budget of 100 million. Okay, because that's what I saw on the job descriptions of COOs, global COOs. So I went out and made sure that I grabbed opportunities in the firms that I was in so that I could manage 300 employees and manage a budget of 100 million. And then by that time, you've ticked it off and you can apply for that next job. But for me, it was a cold, hard, finding the opportunity and going for it.
Thank you. We're going to take one final question is what I've been told. So, okay, Elena.
As a wife, as a mother, and Teddy, and as a CEO, 3 things that you will leave from any women leader or in the path to leadership. 3 things for us. And I have a second question is, what makes you happy?
So what 3 things I would say to women?
It can be 2, it can be 1, whichever it is.
I don't think it's just women. And I think women progress when, we talk about equality. And when I first had my babies, I came back to work and I was advised by some very senior women, don't ever talk about your children, because they'll think that you're not able to do your job anymore. I talked about my children. I talked about work-life balance. And the thing that amazed me was the number of men who came up to me afterwards and said, I wish I'd had flexible working when my children were young, and I wish I'd been able to do those sorts of things. And you see in the countries that are really successful, like the Scandinavian countries, for example, they open up those parental opportunities both ways. And I think that's absolutely critical. We're not quite there yet, and women are perceived in a certain way, and I recognize that. So what would I say to women? I would say, don't stop being a woman, right? I mean, you're a mother, you're a father, hold that and own it, and use that to make you a better leader, to be able to do things for others. So again, for me, I was the first person in Lloyd's to have a baby through surrogacy. And my babies were brand new. I was already the COO of Lloyd's, but I needed to have flexible working. I thought parental leave was really important, so we made sure we extended parental leave for men and women. We made sure we had a surrogacy policy so that the gay couples in our business could also have the same rights. Because if you were part of a male gay couple in the insurance industry, if you had a baby through surrogacy, you had to have paternity leave, which was 3 weeks. I mean, how are you going to bring home a brand new baby and parent it for 3 weeks and hand it off to somebody? So, so what I would say is own that and use it more widely. The other advice I'd give to everybody, including women, is everybody knows my kids come first. My family comes first, always. And I say that to everyone around me as well. So when I've got a sports day or a parents' day or something, sometimes, a few times I've had to miss them, but it's got to be a very big thing for me to miss them. I always go to those things. And that helps me to sleep better at night and know that I'm not failing at too many things at once. And then on that note of failure, the other piece of advice I would give, especially to working parents, is the best thing that I realized was that I needed to accept that I was going to fail at everything but a little bit. So if I could just admit that I was going to fail, I wasn't going to work as hard as I did before I had children, so I was going to fail a little bit at that, but I was going to fail a little at being a mother because I'm not always there, and my kids notice that. But if I try to fail as little as possible in all of those areas, then I'm doing okay. And so that, again, that's not just for women, but it is one of the reasons why women drop out of the workforce. It's because they can't quite make that balance work. So if you can try to make that balance work, if you can try to hold what's true closest, then I think it makes you a better leader. It helps you to stay in the workforce, and it brings other people with you.
Thank you.
What was the other question?
What makes you happy?
What makes me, my family. My family makes me happy, and then my job makes me happy as well. Being able to work with people that I love and to do good things together also makes me happy.
I think we're out of time. I'm really sorry that I'm going to get told off by our lovely events colleagues. So I'm going to welcome Julia back to the stage.
Thank you so much, Shirine. So some final thank yous. Thank you to the Watershed once again for hosting us across the autumn. Thank you to UWE Bristol's Business School for supporting the event, and to the alumni team for plucking out such wonderful speakers this autumn for us. Thank you also to the Co-op team for working so hard with us on this event, and for all the beautiful images that you're going to see in the next room in Waterside 3, which is a glorious archive of Co-op history. So I hope you enjoy those. Whilst we offer these events for free, we'd be really grateful in turn that you fill out one of our feedback forms that you'll be emailed by the end of the week. We need to hear from you both what you enjoyed and how we can make these events better. And a final thanks to Shirine for sharing her fascinating and very personal stories of leadership, and for being here today, this evening. Please now go through towards side 3 and enjoy all of those offerings alongside a glass of something delectable. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the spring.